And another scary moment is the Agnus Dei,
Mm,
the duet with the mezzo, because oftentimes they're not singing in tune and we are singing in octaves.
right.
So if she starts too low, it can be a train wreck. I mean, that's pretty scary. But
I remember hearing your voice for the first time in that Liberame and just being overwhelmed by how big the sound was, but also just how you were able to make it change the colors of the sound. Can you
mhm.
talk a little bit about what it's like as a professional to have to um, make your voice fit comfortably into what you're singing? Because there are some things that you've had to sing, I'm sure, that you have to sing a little bit differently than you sang the Verdi Liberame. Or can you
Mhm.
talk about that going into different styles?
Well, of course, you don't sing Handel and Mozart the same way you sing Puccini per se. I always say Verdi is that middle kind of composer where you have to still sing bel canto because he's truly the last bel canto, great composer. And even the biggest Verdi is still bel canto because it still requires you to sing pianissimo on your top to have a really solid technique, to have the great middle voice, to have the soaring high notes, the pianissimo facility at the top of your voice, the chest that you need in every Verdi role, particularly in the Verdi Requiem, you need to have that nice, juicy chest voice as well. So I think Verdi is that middle. When you sing Puccini, the requirements are different. It's verismo. You have to be able to thrust your voice and also have a beautiful middle voice, of course, but I always say you can rest on the dramatic acting of Puccini. You can have an average voice and still excel in the more dramatic parts as long as you meet the acting requirements, right? And in Mozart and Handel, I feel like you have to be your most honest. It's like singing 24 Italian arias. When you go back into singing that stuff, you have to be the throat is just cannot sustain singing, pushing on the chords, singing on the fat of the chords versus singing on the edges of the chords.
Mm.
It's a different breathing, facility, and like how much air you need to use in order to spin those phrases, how much you reserve, and not holding your throat, but it's more about the breath in the body, controlling how much breath you need to get through those longer phrases and how much you need for the chords to vibrate. Now I'm getting technical, right? It's a whole different thing. But yeah, it's a different singing Strauss. It's very different from singing Verdi, from singing Mozart. It's about negotiation and about how much, like I said, support you need, how much air you need, how long you want to sing these phrases. And so every requirement is different. And switching in and out, you know, I always feel like it is tricky, but for me, I feel my most difficult is when I have to sing recital.
Mm.
Because I'm required to do so many different characters in 90 minutes. And so the requirements are also different from composer to composer. You can't sing Schubert the way you sing Strauss, the way you sing maybe a big Mozart concert aria. And then and later in the evening, when you may put some jazz in there or some spirituals or some music theater, it just every composer, every style, you have to sing on the same voice, but that's why the technique is so important because you have to be able to transition in a hair out of different styles. It's just, and also going from job to job, it's not like I do my job and then I go have a lesson and I go to the other job. Sometimes it's 6 and 7 months where I'm on the roll and I'm singing different things and I have to adjust, to change to refresh my technique, refreshing how I warm up for different things, so it's a constant learning process and being a student.
That's perfect transition into my next thought, which was if you can kind of take us through this your early from your earliest memory that you just knew that you were going to be a musician and kind
Mhm.
of follow that path to your first professional gig. Could you do that for us?
Sure, sure. Well, I'm a graduate of the High School for Performing Arts in Philadelphia, and that's where I found my love for opera. my teacher in high school was a huge opera fan. So every day we listened to Verdi, you know, Puccini, I'm just all the Beethoven, Brahms, all the big symphonies, all the big operatic pieces. And so I just was always fascinated with how people produce those sounds, you
Mm.
know. And even before then, before the ninth grade, I sang in you know, a middle school choir. Was a terrible violinist. In the fourth and fifth grade, I gave it up. I said, you know, back when you could take, you know, instruments in elementary school, you know, that's not standard now, particularly in the big cities.
Mm.
But so I always loved music. Never ever thinking I was going to be an opera singer. I always wanted to be a veterinarian. Yeah, I always wanted to be a veterinarian, and
Wow.
so yeah, then I found this gift that I had, that I always had. All my music teachers recognized that I could make a pretty good sound, you know. But it wasn't until the 10th grade that I realized that I wanted to sing opera. You know, I had this voice, and my teacher, like I said, he introduced me to opera, and I just fell in love with it, and I wanted to be able to do that. You know, I went to my first opera. I was like 15 or 16 at the Opera Company of Philadelphia with Denise Graves singing Carmen, and it changed my life. I really said, and that's when I knew that I wanted to be able to do that, you know. And so I graduated high school, got a scholarship to go to the University of Hartford. And then I won this, then I entered this competition, the Rosa Poncel International Competition. Now, many of you won't know who Rosa Poncel was. She was one of the greatest sopranos of the 20th century, American sopranos, dramatic soprano. She didn't sing very long. She made her Met debut at 21. Well, her foundation always loved to support and sponsor singers very early in their careers. And so when I was 18 years old, I just wanted to win some money to go back to college. And just like $1,000, you know, $2,000 back then, that was a lot of money, you know. And so I wound up winning the competition at Alice Tully Hall, New York City. I think there was 4 rounds of competition. I won $50,000. And my whole life changed. I moved to New York and studied under their auspices, because that was a part of the prize, was that you win the money, you move to New York, you take voice lessons, you take Italian and piano and, you know, and movement and all these things. And then you make your big debut in Lincoln Center. Well, after a year and a half of being in the program, I decided, when I was supposed to make my big debut, you know, in a big solo recital, I realized that I was not ready for a career. I was 20 years old, and there was something in me that knew that I was not ready for that. I remember sitting in the offices at Columbia Artist Management, which is one of the big agencies, international agencies based out of New York, and our agent there was saying all these things to me, and I had no idea what she was talking about. She's like, well, you're going to sing this role, you're going to do this role, and then you're going to fly here and do this. And I'm like, I just knew that I was not ready for that. And so I went back to the foundation and told them that I didn't think I was ready to sing the debut. And they threw me out of the program. They sent me packing back to Philadelphia, you know, cut me off, cut all my funding off. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I was barely 20 years old, didn't have a degree. I was like, hey, what am I going to do? I knew I didn't want to go back to school at Hartford. But yeah, and so I was sitting in a Wendy's restaurant in Philadelphia, in downtown, and these kids came over to me, and they're like, you're that girl that won that competition 2 years ago. And I'm like, what? Like, right, like, how do you know who I am? They're like, they remember me from being in Opera News.
Wow.
Yeah, and so they invited me to come back to Curtis Institute of Music, which was a school in Philadelphia. And I didn't even know about Curtis. That's how green I was. Like, I mean, I knew about Juilliard, of course, and Oberlin, and like all the big schools. I just had no idea about Curtis. And so they took me back to the school, and we were like singing for each other. You know how that goes. You get into a room and everybody's like, you know, jamming out and stuff and singing. Yeah, and then I go home and I get this phone call from Michael Eliason, because one of the kids and I became really good friends, and we like exchanged numbers or whatever. So I get back home the next day, I get a call from Michael Eliason, who was the head of the voice and opera department at Curtis, inviting me to come and audition. And I'm like, what in the world? Like, this is crazy. It's crazy. So anyway, that's how I got to Curtis. I got in and, auditioned there and went to Chautauqua Institute for the summer program and studied with one of the teachers there. And I was at Curtis for 6 years and, did both of my undergrad and my grad at Curtis. And then I went into the Maryland program, which is the Young Artist Program for San Francisco Opera. And so I did Maryland. My summer was a tremendous year because there were so many singers that are singing now that came out of that 2002 class. Quinn Kelsey, Simon O'Neill, Dan Okutlich, Elizabeth Caballero, Laquita Mitchell. I mean, it was just a fantastic dynamic year of artists. Well, okay, after Maryland, I got invited to do the resident program at San Francisco Opera, became an Adler Fellow. He invited me after my summer, and I was there for 2 years, and which was, pretty tough. It's that, do you go to a big program and sing like a 2-line role next to Anna Netrebko, or do you go to a small company where you're doing like every role, like it's a fest situation? Do you do something like that? But San Francisco was wonderful. I still consider that my second home, although I haven't been back to the company in a while. But anyway, so I did my 2 years undergrad there. 2 years of being in the program and the fellowship. And my last year there, I was in the Met Finals. And that was 2004, I think it was. And I didn't win. I was a finalist. I didn't win that year. But 2 years later, I got to sing on the stage because they invited me to cover a role the year after my year in the finals. And then the following year, I got to jump in because the soprano was ill and I was covering. So I got to jump in, and I was sort of already singing, and that's kind of where things took off for me was during that time, 2005, 2006, and so I just started singing, and I've been pretty much making a living just singing, which is a blessing until 6 weeks ago, where everything, but anyway, yeah. So that's kind of how
incredible. I had no idea about that early experience in Wendy's. Yeah. That is just amazing. Wow.
I know. A lot of people say, you need to talk about that more often.
That's just amazing to know that no matter where you're at, people are watching, people are looking. That's a good lesson.
Yes.
I was wondering about your experience at Curtis, because that's a darn good school, and
yeah.
I was wondering about did you ever have to do well, let's just not limit it to Curtis. Let's talk about choral experience. Your experiences singing in choir or in chamber choir. Can you talk about high points and low points and how you navigated having to sing in a choral situation as opposed to singing an operatic one?
Okay. Well, Curtis is all solo discipline. So there is no real choral structure. Even the nights that you aren't singing in the opera, you sing opera chorus, but that's a very different, it's not like full on real chorus work.
Right.
We're singing always as soloists. But when I was in high school, I think that that's where you learn how to be a musician. That's where you get to cut your teeth on being an artist, because you have to learn all the dynamics. You have to sing, every dynamic, of course. You have to work with coloring and shading. And what in my case, my teacher loved all the big works. So we sang, although we were high school, we didn't have that kind of high school youthful young sound. He always had a stable of Mustangs, I had to say, a powerhouse, when I was 16, I didn't sound 16. I always had a much more mature, fuller, rounder sound. I just didn't know how to sing, And I think that everybody around me sort of was like that. Either you had the big gospel kids who had to learn how to sing classically because they came from the gospel choir, and then they had to learn how to do it. Or you had some of us, who would just had these high, rare voices, you know what I mean? So I was really lucky in that way. But choral singing is so different because you have to learn how to blend, and you have to learn how to rely on someone else in order to stay in tune. Well, in soul singing, you don't. It's not like that. It's just you,
Mm.
in that way. Even when I sang in church choir as a young person, as a teenager, I always sang with the adults because my voice was just so much more mature. But even still, you had to rely on somebody else. You had to blend. And in choral singing, I think, there's a lot of other things that you have to I don't want to say manufacture. That's not what I want to say. There's a lot of manipulation. That's not what I want to say. But to create the sound of one voice with one section, with 20 people, 10 people in a section, that's a completely different technique, a different requirement. Where where I guess you can say it's like singing pianissimo as a soloist in that way, where you are going for the finest edge of the chord, right? In order to create the most pure sound
Mm.
in that way. So I would think that it's, I don't know, maybe I'm just pulling strings out the air, but I've been a soloist so long, I didn't sing a lot in choir.
Mm.
But when I hear a lot of choral singers, I go, how does that choral director, and kudos and shout out to all the choral directors out there who can wrangle in, I would say, a herd of cats, I mean, singers, they're all over the place, and you have to come together and create these special, magnificent, when you're singing big Vaughan Williams pieces or Brahms or the big Mozart requiems and things like that. It's a miracle that those things even happen. People don't realize that, right?
Right. Um, I, I'm fascinated by well, first of all, Yardbird came to Chicago when I was in South Bend.
Okay.
And I came very close to going to it, but something came up. I don't remember what it was. I think it was I don't know, like an ensemble requirement or so. I don't remember what it was, but something came up and I couldn't go see it. And I was bummed too, because this is like backstory, but like my voice teacher was Larry Brownlee's ex-girlfriend. So I had connection.
Yes.
And I was like, I had met him backstage in Seattle when he did Don Giovanni there, and and so I was like, oh, I got to see him doing Yardbird. This is incredible. But I never got to see it. I haven't even listened to any of the music.
Oh,
I'm
right.
wondering if you could, first of all, talk about that experience of singing in Yardbird, but also talk about the what it's like to take on a new role that really hasn't been established, so you get to really kind of imprint on it.
Yes. Well, Yardbird was written, of course, for Angela Brown, who's a very good friend of mine, and she's a dynamic soprano. And I tell her all the time, when I do roles that were created for her, I always say, Angela, you have to make them write things that other people can freaking sing. Like, it's like Larry. There's like 3 people in the world that can
Right.
sing, the things that are written for him, but and not nearly as well as he can.
Right.
But I thought Yardbird was a wonderful piece, but the piece that I love the most is Champion.
Mm.
It, Terrence Blanchard's Champion. I think that piece is tremendous. The role that I actually got to do was written for Denise Graves, which is interesting how I got to sing a role that she sang, but how the role is written is kind of written sufficiently. It's written really for like soprano too. You know what I mean? Like, and then one of the arias said there's 2 optional keys. So if you have a soprano with a nice juicy middle voice, you can get away with singing with Champion. But I think like Yardbird and Margaret Garner, which is an opera that was written several years ago by Richard Daniel for Denise, but Angela Brown actually got to sing one of the other soprano role that was written in there. Tremendous. But I got to do Fire Shut Up in My Bones, which is Terrence Blanchard's newest work that's getting a premiere at the Met in a few seasons. That role was written for me, and I love doing new works. I cannot stress enough how freeing it is to do something that is new. Because there's no cage, there's no boundaries. You get to set the tone, you get to set the stage, you get to create it.
Mm.
And if you are someone who has oftentimes been boxed in and put in a there's just a thing. It makes it easier for people to cast when they say, okay, this singer does these roles and this singer sings this composer, and that it's easy for people in casting for them to just box you. But there's some of it, and some singers are, they love it. I sing my 5 or 6, 7 roles, and that's what I sing, or I'm a singer. I don't, I love to do concert and recital. That's what I do. I don't like the opera, it's fine. But then there's some of us who are like, give it all to me. I want to be able to, do recitals. I want to be able to do the big concert works. I want to be able to sing operas. And then I want to be able to do Italian and German. And I want to do new works. And I want to do, there's some of us who just want the Baskin Robbins of, of a kind of career.
Mm.
And no, sorry, Tom, yeah, what's 48 flavors? Am I right? One of those. Anyway, but you know what I mean? Like, it's like some of us who just, that's we thrive on that. But to me, it's wonderful. And I've gotten to do Jake Hagee, Dead Man Walking quite a bit. And I love new American opera. I mean, although Dead Man Walking is 20 years old, but still, there is something about these characters and real flesh and blood playing real. And that's just a challenge, right? To play someone who's lived and died, someone like a Charlie Parker who, we know his story, but trying to put a new put more into the atmosphere of the story, which I think Yardbird could do a better job about telling more of why he was who he was, or why he died from the overdose, like going deeper.
Mm.
I think that we have the license to do that when we are doing new works, to really tell the stories, to really go in and dig in and pull out those roots and deliver on that big grand scheme of opera on the opera stage. So I now Lord knows what's going to happen now. We might just go back to the Chung Chunks, the Traviatas, and the standard repertoire, the Figaros, the top 5s, because everyone's so nervous with what's going to happen with the crises. So I hope we keep doing chamber music. I hope we keep doing new works. I hope we keep, pushing the envelope artistically, on the lyric stage, keep telling the stories, because that's what's going to bring people into the theater.
Right. Well, one of the things that interests me as a singer, I remember in my master's recital, I was singing a piece by Cui, Yavas Lubil, and I got so emotional singing it in the concert that I started like getting emotional, so much so that I couldn't control my sound. I was wondering, I'm sure there's been many moments like that for you where you have to control. Yes. What do you do? And have you had experiences like that where you are like, because I'm thinking of Jake Hagee. That opera is, I mean, I wept just listening to it on Spotify.
Yeah, exactly.
That intense and that visceral. How do you keep yourself centered and just right there? Because you're not singing for you. You're singing for the crowd. And anyway.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, if I feel, you can't feel. It's that balance of the line of where you can go. Like, if the line is here, you need to be just, the emotion is just under that. Because if you hit it or if you go over it, you've lost it. It's over. You lost the audience. You lost the storytelling. So I always go, when I feel myself, I've done it enough now where, especially the bigger parts, when you're seeing the Toscas and the Desdemonas, I got the chance to do Desdemona in Australia in concert. And when I was first learning that role, I was weeping. When we get to Act 4, I'm just weeping in my lessons, weeping in my coachings. And my teacher's like, you have to get it out now because you can't do that on the stage.
Wow.
And it was just so difficult for me to even to the moment of when she starts Act 4, she knows she's going to die. So before she comes into even the South, the Ave Maria, telling the story about, when she was a young girl, and she had this, this maid, and how, she already knows. So once I start that act, I'm already in that place. So it's difficult, it is difficult, but I always feel like when I'm getting to hey, bring it on down, because it happens, everything, the support goes up, the larynx goes up, the throat closes, and it's just, once you're there, there's no way to try to get it back. Sometimes, different tricks of, like, doing something silly on stage, or turning up stage, and kind of like taking the moment to get myself together, you know. Oftentimes there's always kind of shenanigans always going on stage constantly. Everyone thinks that we're all just so professional up there, and everyone's so focused, and there is always something distracting happening, So there are, this is the thing. You're creating these moments, and off stage, there's, like, stage hands and lighting guys and prop people, on the other side of that, So,
Right.
but I think that it takes practice. Sometimes you have to lose it in performance in order to know how to not go there. And I tell young singers all the time, the only way you know how to do it is if you do it. The only way you know how to step back from that moment is to go through the moment,
Mm.
and understand the feelings, and be like, okay, I'm getting there. Let me, focus and center down. So, as you know, you're a singer. There's always something to worry about.
Beautiful. What about having to sing through vocal issues, through
Mm.
borderline sicknesses, through, that's a big part, obviously, of being a singer. What advice, or what's the best advice you've ever given? What are things that you do, technique wise,
Mhm.
I don't know, psychologically, to get you through those moments?
Well, that's where like I said, but we're talking about the technique before. That is where that's where the technique really comes out, is when you're not your 100%. And as many of the great singers talk about, they didn't get sick until after they stopped singing. After they retired is when, like, Krista Ludwig talks all the time. She never got sick the day she retired, after the day she retired, and I think people sing more not well and not 100% throughout their career than they do 100%, for various reasons. You're singing through sickness, singing through vocal injuries. People don't talk about that kind of stuff. For me, when I'm not my 100%, if have to sing on swollen chords, which is deadly, please don't do that. But sometimes you have no choice. I lots of steam, lots of steam. Steam is your friend. I steam constantly with my steamer. Lots of water, of course the honey, and all of those things. Quiet. I'm telling you, if you have a performance and you have a few days of rest, water, steam, and quiet will change your whole life. It will change your whole life. And you just have to rely on the support on the body. I mean, my ribs are exhausted, particularly on the days that I don't feel well, because I'm constantly always making sure that I am really on my support, that I'm really using my ribs and really using my lower muscles, and really singing with my relaxed, throat, open throat, and I'm really, really relying heavily on my technique to get through. And sometimes, people don't talk about midway through a performance where you have vocal fatigue, because sometimes you could start out the gate like a racehorse, like, yeah, I'm in it, and then midway through something happens, allergies kick in, you're maybe in a new theater. Sometimes when you're doing concert rep, you only get to see the theater like one day and before the performance, so you don't have time to adjust. Like, if you're in a opera, you get a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to figure a theater out. But when you're going from concert gig to concert gig, especially with the older theaters, allergy attacks. I mean, I've done the Verdi Requiem, literally almost laryngitis by the end because of the mold or the dust or whatever. And so I really have to heavily rely on my body and my mind, and to calm myself down, but particularly to remember, because even in ready rhythm, there's no going away. Like, it's not opera. You can't go an intermission and readjust. Like, there's none of that. So it's literally oftentimes a measure by measure, page by page, just micromanaging your way through getting through the performance.
Wow. Yeah, that's intense.
Steam, water, quiet, steam, water. I'm sure I've messed up many hotels with like turning on the faucet because the humidifier just never can get the room where you needed to be. It's turning on the all night long. I know that's horrible for all the conservationists, but what we do is people pay a lot of money to hear us. So if I wake up in the room, it's like, steam because I got to go out and do my job. It's just what
Right.
it is.
Right. That's funny. I just flashed on because I do watch your interviews, by the way, on Facebook. They're fantastic.
I got a good one tomorrow. A good one
I can't wait.
Thursday. Yeah.
I hope the choir here will follow you too.
Please.
Well, and I'll tell you what I like about your interviews is there's so much truth bombs. I mean, it's truth. There's no artifice. It's like bam, bam, bam. I love it.
That's all it's gonna be. That's why it's called Kiki with a K, conversations. None of that other fake stuff. I mean, there's plenty of people doing that, and let them do that.
Well, I wanted to open this up to the rest of the choir, and if please use your videos, choir, and if you have questions to ask, please ask them. Interrupt me or however you want to do it, but I'd love to hear you guys ask some questions. But meanwhile, while they're thinking, I just wanted to ask you too about your Met debut.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm thinking it's Louisa Miller, right? That was the
yes. Mm-hmm,
yeah.
mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that? You were a young singer then, I imagine.
Yeah, I was 30. I was 30.
Talk about that experience and I mean, what was it like to, for the first time, come out on that stage and just be like, I am on the biggest stage in the world. Wow. This is,
wow.
Tell me about that.
It was, I guess I had it was incredible, but I was just so naive in the thinking and not even realizing, you know what I mean? It's like when you're young, you don't even realize that you're on the Met stage. Like, you're there, but you don't realize the magnitude of the moment. Of being there. And oftentimes that's a good thing, because if you really get into the magnitude of the moment, you might crumble, you might fall apart. There's some people who do get up there and they don't make it through because the moment is just too big for them. But for me, I guess, I was lucky to get about 2 weeks of rehearsal, which doesn't happen for covers, because at the Metropolitan Opera, covers have separate rehearsals and you don't actually have to sit in and watch people like standard opera houses. If you're covering or understudying, you have to be there taking notes in all the rehearsals. The Metropolitan is not like that. And so oftentimes people are being pushed on the stage with very little. And when I say very little, I mean very little rehearsal, very little time with the conductor, very little time with the other artists, because if you're covering and stepping in for someone, that means you have not worked with the other cast. And if you've done a rehearsal, you've worked with the cover cast and not the principal cast. So that was new to me, because coming out of San Francisco, which is another big company, and being a young artist, you're definitely over prepared in that way. So stepping in on the stage of the Met, I got a chance to work a little bit with the conductor for my third performance. So my first performance, I didn't get a chance at all to work with the maestro. And I was the first cover, but they had bought someone else in, because originally there was supposed to be another Louisa. She never showed up for rehearsal, and their soprano's name will remain. I won't say who it was. She was famous though. And then they brought in another soprano because they couldn't have me, like this kid, like amateur, literally, even though I was fresh out of a big program. Still, they couldn't have me opening up. It's the biggest thing I'd ever done. They brought in another named soprano, and she came and she was fine. And then all of a sudden, I don't know if she was suffering from allergies or suffering from vocal whatever, she started not feeling well. And so she did the first performance, and then I did the second, third, and fourth performance. The fourth performance was the broadcast, was the international broadcast performance. And people forget because they think that that was my debut. I had actually done it 2 times before, but I never got a chance to work with the maestro until I had to do the broadcast. And so he brought me in the day before to run through a rehearsal and give me all these notes from like having mistakes from my other performance. Well, in 2.5 weeks, we never really worked together. So of course it was going to be kind of tricky and weird. And so he brought me in and he gave me all these notes and, are you going to remember what I'm asking you? And I'm like, yeah, I remember, he didn't believe it, but I remembered everything he told me. And I'm like, listen, especially as a young singer, you're just a sponge and you're just soaking it all in. And we want to do well. I wanted to do well. I wanted to have a good, a performance, and I wanted the maestro to be pleased about, what I would needed him to do, but what he needed me to do. But yeah, it's an amazing thing to be on the stage, to have your dream actually come true, that I don't know about other people, but there have been times where I've been in situations that I've been blessed enough to actually see my dream come true. And I wanted to turn around and walk out of the door because I was just like, holy crap, like, it's too much. And then you get there and you're like, okay, this is what you asked for. This is what you worked for. Now you just got to get out there and just do your very best, And I just went back to the Met, and it's been a long time since my debut up until the time that I just went back this season to sing Serena and Porgy. Had been a really long time. And then I got on the stage and I was like, it felt so different, because I had experience, I had the maturity, I had the, maturity in the role and maturity as an artist. And it was good. It felt good because I knew what I was doing. You know what I mean? And it wasn't the excitement of being there like, oh my God, this time around. It was more like the taking in the moment and just having the control, being in control of it instead of letting the moments control you. I think that was the difference.
Well, I don't see any of my students asking questions, so I'm going to keep going until they do.
Okay, come on, you guys, don't be shy. This is the moment to ask. You may not ever get this moment again.
But talk about Porgy and Bess, because I think that was the first opera I ever saw. I saw it when I was like 13 or 14.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was the Simon Rattle, Willard White.
Yes. From E&O or from English National.
Yeah, I think so. And I just remember I was just weeping uncontrollably, and just, what an American opera. Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
And it's seen quite an awakening recently too, in terms of shows and productions.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about what it's like to be in such a unique opera, number one, and number two, the meaning that it carries for you individually? Because you have done that role. How many times have you done Serena?
Oh my goodness, I've done Francesca Zambello's production 4 or 5 times, which is not a lot, but I think it's a lot for doing one performance. I don't know, remember almost 100 performances of Serena, I think, in total. But but Francesca's production I've done in San Francisco, Washington, Chicago, Fort Worth this last year, and somewhere else. And we might be doing it in Australia next year, depending on Corona.
Right.
But and then doing the Met's new production now. So but it's I always say you never get to sing with your friends as much. Like, so many people in these casts are people that are my friends, in real life, my really close colleagues, people who have become like my family. And in opera, of course, the community is really, really small, but in the Black opera community, that's a whole other thing. And it's just tremendous. Like, I always say there's nothing like Catfish Row. There's nothing like it. You can't compare it to anything. Good, bad, and ugly, and amazing, and brilliant, everything else. It's just, it's nothing that you can compare it to. I always say, you know, a lot of people, get stuck oftentimes in Porgy, and it's not their fault. It's not their fault. It's the industry, and it's just how things work out. But it has put a lot of people's kids through college. It has bought a lot of homes. It has, afforded artists to see the world. You know, with that being said, Porgy is also very complicated in its history, and it's complicated in how directors and administrators see it in the scheme of opera. You know, I always say everyone wants to get the best Black singers in the world and get the most high profile and the most tremendous instruments to put on Catfish Row, and they can't find anywhere else to put you in other places. And that is awful. Like, this 2020, let's do better. We need to do better with that. We should have been doing better with that a long time ago. And some people, some people make it through the stream. Some fishies make it, up the stream and get to sing lots of other things and have, but many don't. Many don't. And so you, as an artist, you carry that with you. And I have to speak for myself, but I know I'm speaking for a lot of other people. It can be difficult, and it can be very complicated in this amazing, beautiful thing that's happening at the same time. Because that if you get up there and you do the best, you turn out the best performances that you can, you're giving all you can. Sometimes it doesn't translate into what it should. Say if you were singing a Verdi or a Puccini or a Mozart role or something, you get out there and then the contrasts come because they're like, we have to have this singer and other things. It doesn't always translate. Most times it doesn't translate. And so while it's incredible in the audience, and a lot of companies, I think, miss the mark on thinking that Porgy is this incredible, it's a moneymaker for I've never been to a Porgy and Bess that wasn't like completely sold out. I've never been in one that wasn't like almost a box office sold out, or either sold out, oversold. They were scalping tickets in San Francisco like it was a rock concert when we did it.
Gosh,
it was unbelievable. The Met, they were scalping tickets at the Met for that performance. But yeah, it's complicated. It's complicated, but it's an incredible experience, incredible music, the audience, it's tremendous. If you're not weeping at the end of Porgy, even a badly sung Porgy,
yeah, right.
It's like a badly sung Butterfly or Bohème. Like it is
right.
what it is. The story is what it is. It's still tremendous in that way. Yeah.
Along the same difficult, complicated topic, you talked about seeing Denise Graves in Carmen. How important is it for people to see, for Black children to see Black artists, for Asian kids to see Asian artists? How important is it for there to be diversity in casting?
Extremely. Because many of us would not be here if we didn't see people who look like us on the stage. It's just, there's no way around trying to justify not having a diverse cast anywhere, particularly in America. That is America. We are so made up of so many. We are a gumbo. Right. You know what I mean? That is America. And to not have diverse casting, to not have diversity on the other side, which I think is a whole other issue that needs to be addressed immediately. To have diversity in casting, to have diversity in our administration, to have diversity on your boards, because there's a lot of money in communities of color that I think classical music misses the mark because they don't do the extra work to reach out. Listen, they're not coming to you. You have to go to them. They don't even know that there are communities of color who have thriving, they have love. They go to the opera, they go to the symphony, they go to theater. But unless, if you have a development director who's scared to go into another community, then you ain't gonna get that money. And it's just important. It's important because, listen, it changed my life. I didn't grow up disadvantaged. I grew up a 2-parent household, only child, middle class. I thought we were rich. We vacationed, I never wanted for anything. And so I didn't grow up disadvantaged in a way, but opera changed my life. Music changed my life. Seeing Denise up there changed my life. It made me realize that I didn't have to look like Birgit Nielsen, who I knew because I went to high school because my teacher loved opera. I didn't have to look like those women in order to aspire to do that. And then to Jesse Norman, Marian Anderson, of course, from Philadelphia, Leontine Price, and it made it real for me. And I know that when the kids are looking at me, and it's not even just Black kids, white kids, Asian kids, when they see me up there, because they see me and I don't look like what they think an opera singer looks like, it makes them inspires them to believe that it's possible for them. So you have to have a diversity in casting. You have to have diversity in the orchestra. How important is that to look down and see not just white and Asian people in the orchestra? It's important to see, yeah, I mean, nowadays mostly is everything's Asian, because all the Asian people play instruments. It's a part of the culture. They have to play something, like like Russians. They have to either sing, play an orchestra, dance, or be a gymnast. That's real, and so it is. But isn't it important for you to have to be a teacher and teach all kinds of people?
Yeah. Yeah, I think if it hadn't been for I think diversity is well, in academia is certainly not as diverse as it could be.
It's right, and as diverse as it should be, right? Exactly.
Right. But yeah, that's a can of worms there.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. Yeah, I mean, and diversity within the gender, sexuality, all of those things. You know what I mean? All of those things are important.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't see my kids asking questions.
I don't know. Maybe they don't like me. Come on.
Maybe they're not even watching.
I see two people.
Mackenzie, ask a question.
I was actually going to ask a question. Before you said your first opera was Carmen, correct?
Yes.
Is that your favorite opera you've seen? Or do you have a different favorite?
Excuse me. My favorite opera to see is probably Butterfly. I love Madame Butterfly. I love Tosca. I love to sing and watch Tosca. I guess I'm a big Puccini girl, huh? I love German opera very much. I know that's kind of weird. Like I love Strauss. I love Wagner, which I hated before. Oh my God. Like I just didn't understand it because I didn't have the maturity to understand these stories. But I love Rheingold, and I love parts of certain Wagner operas. But yeah, my favorite is probably Butterfly. I mean, nothing beats the last 30 minutes of Butterfly. It's just heartbreaking,
Right.
And Falstaff. I like Falstaff. Verdi's Falstaff, the comedy. Brilliant. There's nothing that's perfect. There's nothing wrong with that. With nothing like, oh, maybe I would change this, or maybe perfection.
Any other questions?
I was going to ask you, because you had mentioned about technique.
Uh-huh.
What is your best technical advice?
Two things. If your teacher doesn't address breathing, then you're with the wrong teacher. Breath and support it's like a gas. It's gas in your car. If your car is on E and you're driving on a freeway and it stops, it ain't going nowhere. Just like if you don't breathe properly and support the sound for the tones that you want to make, the sound is not going to go anywhere, and you're not going to go anywhere. So I think that breathing is important. It's the foundation of any technique, breath and support, but also learning the difference between good tension and bad tension. If you leave out of your lesson and you feel a little hoarse, that means there's some kind of holding that you're doing. So I think the more you can get aware of what your body, where you hold your tension, you know, how you start a phrase, you know, when you breathe and you approximate the chords, you know, like how they come together, how you release them, like those things are the foundation of great singing, which breath, chord coordination, all that stuff is one. It's insieme, it's all together. They all work, you know, together, excuse me. But allergies. But yeah, those to me, those are most important things. So breathing, you know, when you how you make the sound and how you release the sound. And that all happens through the thinking. If you cannot make a beautiful sound if you can't think about the kind of sound you want to make. You can't make an effective sound unless you think about it first. You have to be smart and you have to be intentional with everything. They always talk about Maria Callas being such a great artist because everything had intention. Everything. There was nothing that was taken for granted. I always tell my singers, do not give anything away for free. Do not throw things away. Everything means something. And I think that is the basis of the foundation, of the basis of the foundation of good technique to me.
Beautiful. Any other questions?
Oh, this young man over here has a question with the hat on.
I actually do. So there was a few times that you brought up just kind of being like thrown under the fire into a performance, which I can imagine caused a lot of performance anxiety. And that's one thing I suffer with quite a bit when I'm performing. Is there any like tips or anything that to help get rid of that?
Yes, what yeah, it's interesting. I feel like I spent my whole career like being thrown in the fire and I've learned how to manage that. You know, I always feel like I have a reputation of like, oh, give it to Karen. She can, she'll figure out how to make it work. You know what I mean? Or like last minute casting or when someone gets sick. But I always feel like, listen, every time you sing, you're not you, right? Every time you sing a piece, you sing, you know, you're not yourself. And if the character or the person that you're singing doesn't have anxiety, then you don't have anxiety. It's you. You have the beauty of being a singer and delivering the story is the telling the story is that you're telling somebody else's story. So if you are bringing Jordan into, you know, you're bringing yourself into it, right? Because it's you, it's coming out of you. But the beauty is that we become these people and we can rest on that. And I think start there. I always say, start with the text, tell the story without the music, find the emotion, find the crescendos, find the nuances without even speaking, without singing. If you with that, and then once you bring the voice, the vocalism into it, you're already there. You're already there. And then you go up from there. It's only way up from there. Now, if you go the other way and you start being crazy and like being Jordan again, I mean, you know what I mean? And then you got to go back, you got to reset and do it over again. And that takes practice. Listen, practice doesn't have anything to do with putting the chords together and putting air through them. You know, like practice is the nuts and bolts, the dirty work, you know, the learning the music and, you know, going through your text. But try that and see. You know, and I always tell students, the practice makes the performance. So you've got to spend so much more on that part. So when you get to the performance, all you're doing is the job and you get the check. That is not the hardest part. You know, that has other challenges. It's the nuts and bolts, the dirty work, the boring stuff that determines the success.
Any other questions before we close this down? Yes, Mackenzie. Can't hear you, you're muted.
Is there a specific language that you recommend someone to learn if they want to go into opera?
Always Italian, of course. Italian is the first language. But I also say, once you get to a point where you start nailing down your repertoire, like where your voice is gonna land, which can be different. It can be different from your late 20s to your 30s to your 40s. But if you kind of like, I kind of like this music or my voice kind of suits this, learn that language. You know, there are the three languages, Italian, French, German, right? There are the opera languages. You don't have to go and learn Russian unless you want to. You don't have to go and learn Czech if you want to. But I always say learn Italian and then either a French or a German, because that, you know, what is the point of like learning French and you wind up singing your whole career in German and you're struggling at 40 to learn the language, you know? Or, you know, if you are singing specifically Italian, but most of your work is in Germany. Like you're singing all of the big, you know, romantic Italian repertoire, but it's mostly in Germany, you know? So I always say, learn the mother language and then, you know, be familiar with all of them, because you might be singing with a French conductor who doesn't want to sing, who doesn't want to speak to you in Italian or, you know, or English. And I speak a little bit of everything. I always say my Italian is better in Germany and my German's better in France. I always say that, like, because I get so nervous because I mostly do primarily my work in America, but when I do go over it, I do concert and I do all those things. I have to really, really focus my mind and force myself into, you know, making mistakes. That's another thing. Please get comfortable with making mistakes. Please get comfortable with embarrassing yourself, whatever that means. That is where your success is in your mistakes. That is where your next level is in crash and burn. Trust me when I tell you, I don't care what nobody says. If you're in rehearsal and it's falling apart, that's where it needs to fall apart. So that when you're on the stage, it happens. Do not be afraid to make mistakes. Do not be afraid to ask questions. And do not be afraid to say, I don't know.
Amen.
Yeah.
God, that was church.
That's what you get over here, the real, honey.
Hey, guys, before we close down, I just want to profuse thanks to you, Karen, for such a beautiful interview. And also, guys, please look her up on Facebook.
Yes.
She does these fabulous online live interviews with her friends that are they're hysterical. They are truth like that, like church moments like that. And yeah, there's just no artifice. And thank you so much, Karen. You really, I mean, just so generous, and it's a pleasure to talk to you and reacquaint. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for inviting me, and please don't be a stranger, okay?
All right, take care.
All right, bye, you guys. Bye.
Hey guys, Jordan,
Yes.
Joanna. Has everybody, have you guys all done a track for the Queen program? Sydney, I have you.
I'm kind of in a predicament.
What?
Bass line is too low, tenor line is too high.
Jordan, just do what you can do. Come on, make it work.
All right.
Any other problems? Like you need to get on it because it's due like in minutes, so soon. Any other problems, issues? Hey guys,
Is this
thank
a
you.
requirement?
What?
Is it a requirement?
It's not a requirement. I can't make anything a requirement right now. Nothing's in the syllabus. So yeah, you can do what you want to do, but it would speak well of us if we did this, I think.
I just don't think I have the time to do it.
Yeah, I mean, you have to do what's good for you. Joanna, you're the only one with 5 kids, so
True.
no one else has that legitimate excuse. Jordan, I'm sorry, do you have 5 kids? I don't. Yeah. Okay. All right. So thank you guys for your great questions. That was. Don't you love her? She's just fantastic. Anyway, and truly do follow her. I mean, honestly, those live things are a hoot. She was drinking a glass of wine last night with, not last night, the night before, with this other, oh my God, it was hysterical. I was rolling on the floor laughing. Anyway, great musical interview. I mean, they're all music related, singer related, so worth following. Anyway, all right, guys, good to see your faces. Ciao.